The San Francisco 49ers pipeline continues to grow. Another GM plucked from the 49ers front office, Rand Carthon, now the new GM of the Tennessee Titans. We'll talk about the draft picks that come along with that, comp picks galore for the 49ers, and John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan, if you had to pick one, coach of the year or executive of the year. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you, as always, at BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker. Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Nicholas Winkler, come on down.
And is always the case on our Tuesday night, if you're watching it, the premiere on YouTube. Wednesday episodes with our weekly guest, Mr. Nick Winkler, the voice of the fan, famous for so many things in life, like being on TV, game shows, and being on your Monterey televisions back in the day as a sports anchor, and probably heard his voice on the radio, reporting traffic with me back in the day as well. And of course, the host on Gold Faithful, the precursor of a podcast that before we jumped on here and started doing Locked On 49ers with you daily, Mr. Nick Winkler. Nick, how you feel, man? Are you pumped for another 49ers Cowboys playoff game?
Right. I mean, you don't hope to play the Cowboys going into the playoffs, because they're a good football team. But at the same time, there's that part of you, right, that just remembers back to the 90s and some of us even to the 80s where it's like, I want to beat Dallas and I want to beat them bad. Like, I want them to come into our house, I want to kick their butts, and it's going to feel good. And I want them to go home crying just like they did last year.
Yeah, and it's developing a whole new era, too, of Cowboy-hating 49ers fans, because a lot of fans, if they're younger especially, don't remember the 90s stuff, and there was other stuff in the 70s before that, so every generation's kind of had one, and it's been the Seahawks more recently, but now multiple games against the Cowboys. Usually what fuels a rivalry more is if both franchises win, though, and It's been a little one-sided with the 49ers beating the Cowboys recently, so that's when it really stings, right? Like if the Niners beat the Seahawks in 2013, would we be talking about the Seahawks as much as we do, right? So how does that – we talked about this a little bit. I put a poll up on Twitter asking what the rivalry rating is for fans, and it was a resounding number one for the Seahawks, number two for the Cowboys. How would you rank the 49ers rivals right now in your sort of hate index?
Yeah, I think it's got to be that, right? I mean, like you said, it's like kind of what have you done for me lately? And over the last decade or so, it's been a lot of Seahawks dominating the 49ers, and that's been tough to swallow as a 49ers fan. So that was a huge win on Saturday. That just felt good deep down inside. Early in the game, I'm watching it with my buddy Money, and he's like, Pete Carroll, he's looking too happy on the sideline, blah, blah. And then at the end, he's like, I need more shots of Pete Carroll. Show me Pete. Where's Pete? And I'm just like, yeah, he comes on, and he's got that frustrated look on his face. And you love that. He's not chewing on anything either at the end, so he's not happy. That was a great feeling. And of course, you don't like the Cowboys. You can't like the Cowboys. I've heard people that are like, I like the Niners and the Cowboys. I'm like, okay, you don't really understand football.
Yeah, let me guess. You like the Bulls and you like the Yankees.
And you like
too,
the Yankees.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you like the Dodgers too and the Giants? Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
no, you hate both teams. You hate the Packers. That's about it. I mean, there's a few other teams that you don't really like. Yes. That I never really understood. They're not rivals. I've never really got that. I don't like the Raiders, but I don't hate them.
I've had an anti-Oakland team since '89, more so because of the A's. But then the Raiders fans, and just knowing so many Raiders fans and their persona, and that's part of what it is. I think a lot of teams fans, even if they don't have a big rivalry, they probably rank the Cowboys pretty high. America's team, get out of here with that. And the Raiders always have we're the bad kids on the block. It's like, oh, come on. It's kind of corny. So I think there's enough there. And Croc, I love what he said yesterday. It's kind of what you said earlier, Wink, is just like, oh, dude, bring on the Cowboys. Please, the Cowboys. Yeah. And he has his own personal thing, too. And then Croc's like, yeah, dude, I'm not scared of anybody, right? Like, that's how Croc rolls. Give me the bad Cowboys. Give me America's team.
I've been asked a lot about this matchup. And to me, it kind of comes back to, like, one thing. Who they are, right? Because the 49ers, and a lot of people are trying to compare last year's 49ers team to, and Dallas last year's team, and, how they're different, how is this a different matchup? And we know any given Sunday, anything can happen. But just who they are. The 49ers are the same team. The Dallas Cowboys are the same team in the sense of how they prepare, how they're going to attack you, their execution, like the coaching, the level of that. And at the end of the day, the 49ers just have the edge. It will be extremely difficult for really any team, especially Dallas Cowboys, to match their physicality. So you can have these good players. They had good players last year. You can have good weapons. They had good weapons last year. Right? Like Dallas Cowboys had the number one scoring offense last year. They had the number one yardage offense last year. And when you come up against a team that really they're the bullies, like real life bullies, you tuck your tail. And that's what I think, if I were to say how this game is going to go again, I think it'd be something very similar. Now, again, that's not saying the Cowboys can't win. But if the 49ers just play their game because of how they're built, how this team is built, that mindset, that's a difficult team to beat in the playoffs. And that's why the 49ers, 2 times Kyle Shanahan, these guys have been to the playoffs. Where they go? NFC Championship, Super Bowl. Because it's just difficult if you can't match that. And I don't think the Cowboys can.
It's because the 49ers have physicality advantage. I think they have an X's and O's advantage. And then I think they have an athleticism advantage too across the board. And then you look at, okay, well, they got Dak Prescott. 49ers are starting a 7th-round rookie. But that's not really an advantage with the way that Brock Purdy's playing either. So when you look at this game on paper,
and with how Dak has been playing.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, he had a great game.
He had a good game.
Awesome.
Here's the thing about him.
The exact same thing to the Buccaneers, right?
Right.
With Brock Purdy.
You're right.
Here's the thing about Prescott. And again, you know how close I am to these Cowboy fans. They did not know at all what to expect in that game last night. And for different reasons than us not knowing what to expect from Brock Purdy. Our whole thing is, man, 7th-round rookie, at some point is going to come down to earth. And it just seems like he's just not, right? But that's the unknown with us. Not if he's going to be consistent with what he's been. And so far, it's just, you see what he is. He's legit. He's balling. Dak Prescott, they didn't know because he missed 5 games and still led the NFL in interceptions. You look at their last game that they played just a week ago. And everybody can get caught up on this Tampa Bay game, and it was a dominant performance. I just don't think Tampa Bay is good. But the week before that, you got dogged by the quarterback, Sam Howell, whatever his name is, Howell from UNC, and the Washington Commanders. Like, destroyed, like they beat them to a pulp. It was like 26-6 or whatever it was. So, and the kicker missed an extra point in that game as well. So, it's like they didn't know what Cowboy team would show up because they don't know who this team is. One week it looks a certain way, next week it doesn't, even in some of their games that they won, like against the Houston Texans. Like the 49ers, we've seen like a weird half. But you typically, especially over the last 3 months, have not seen a weird entire game. And with the Cowboys, they don't know. So, I don't know. I mean, everybody's going to get caught up on this last game, and that was awesome to see. But I like the way the 49ers match up against this team. I really do.
I mean, you mentioned the X's and O's, right, that the 49ers have the advantage there, and we all know they do on offense. We all know Kyle's going to bring it, right? He's going to be ready to go. He's going to have some fun plays drawn up and schemed and this and that. Are we worried about D'Amico Ryans with all these interviews? I mean, this is kind of a big deal, right?
Well, he had 2 extra days because the 49ers played Saturday and the Cowboys
4
played
interviews, though?
Yeah, 4 years. Everybody who has job openings interviewing like somebody with the 49ers. Adam Peters turned down Tennessee, so they're like, all right, well, what about Randy Carthon? And he's like, okay. So they were able to get somebody from the 49ers. They wanted to interview both GM candidates, and they don't have a head coach opening, but all the teams that have a head coach opening, and we'll see if there's any new ones that pop up, have all requested to interview D'Amico Ryans. So Niners are doing something right up and down the coaching.
But it's all this week, right? That's what worries me is that maybe he'll
well,
get
I
a
think
little
these
distracted
are like
with these interviews.
I think these interviews are more
Just
sort
basic.
of precursors to something big, like something either they fly to you and you have a short meeting, or virtual meeting or something like that. He's not flying out anywhere or something, getting ready for this game. The 49ers lose, then he can go focus and go somewhere and have big interviews and do all that, or it'll have to be the week before the Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens with D'Amico Ryans, but clearly in demand. And so Rand Carthon is now gone. He was the pro personnel director for the San Francisco 49ers. And now I don't know. He was director. His titles have changed a couple times. He came from the pro scouting side of the 49ers front office. If I remember correctly, 49ers director of player personnel was his latest title. Now the general manager of the Tennessee Titans. We'll talk about that move and what the 49ers are probably going to get in return now with all of their compensatory selections in the 2023 draft. And then speaking of the front office and how this team was built, Kyle Shanahan's doing a hell of a job, and guys are open, and like this offense is humming right now, but the defense is playing well too, and they've got a lot of weapons. So the question I'm going to pose to you guys, you can only give out one award. Is it Coach of the Year to Kyle or Executive of the Year to John for all of the pieces Kyle has to work with? We'll talk about that next. Today's episode brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard me talk about this mobile game app, and I can't tell you how much fun I've had competing against my fellow Locked On NFL hosts. And I did not come in first in our little competition of team building here, but you could go 25 years and build yourself a dynasty. I'm in year 2 right now, and I love the challenging nature of it because you don't start with a roster that's easy to build, and then you build it up and you start building it up. And I've got myself my quarterback in place, and I'm getting a better coaching staff together, and you decide what kind of scheme you want to run. You're in charge of every single aspect of your franchise. Even sometimes you get knuckleheads popping up and doing something. You got to take care of that. You don't even expect that to happen in a week-to-week basis during the season. Hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, all the ups and downs of a season to build your dynasty. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM, completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want to and when you want to. And soon, Locked On 49ers fans, Ultimate GM will be hosting a special competition where you can win amazing monthly prizes. Stay tuned for details in an upcoming episode there. And Locked On 49ers listeners get a 100% free boost in their franchise when they use promo code Locked On inside the game. To download the game, go to ultimate-gm.com. Look it up on the app stores as well. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen. Make sure you're checking out everything else the network has to offer, like the Peacock and Williamson NFL show, myself and former NFL scout Matt Williamson talking about the entire league every day here on the network. And with draft season really coming to, really important for a lot of teams that aren't still in the tournament here, that aren't a part of the 8 teams that are still playing. It's already draft season for them and for a lot of fans out there as well. And extra draft picks for the 49ers. You're going to want to know who those late 3rd round prospects are. Listen to Locked On NFL Draft Daily featuring one Eric Crocker. All right, fellas. Rand Carthon got himself a job with the Tennessee Titans. The Niners lost Mayhew 2 years ago now, along with Saleh. So they've got comp picks for that. They got a comp pick for Mike McDaniel last year. So the 49ers, they traded away, if you remember, this is the end. This is the final payment of the Trey Lance trade up from the 2021 draft. So the 49ers don't have a first round pick. They traded their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, next year's 5th for Christian McCaffrey. So they don't have their own picks in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round or 4th round this year. But they still have 3 third round picks because of these compensatory selections. And then none of them are going to be in the top 100. But like we've seen for the last few years, the 49ers have been playing the comp game pretty well. They've got a few picks in the early 100s. So they might be drafting like, say, 100, 102, 104, something like that. They'll have 3 picks at the very end, the compensatory portion outside of the top 100 of the 1st or the 3rd round. So they got 3 picks there. They got more comp picks coming later as well. So they have no 4th round pick, but they're going to have, and look, these projections have turned out to be pretty darn accurate now with a lot of folks, losing DJ Jones in free agency, some Arden Key, some players like that, getting some compensatory selections. So they're likely going to have 3 5th round picks this year. So 3 thirds, no 4th, 3 5ths, a 6th, and 3 more 7th rounders. So even though they don't have their own pick in the first 3 rounds, the first 4 rounds, they've got all these comp picks, and they're still going to have 10, maybe more if D'Amico Ryans gets a job with the comp picks. So Croc, we're going to be doing crazy late round mock action. I go to those mock draft simulators. I went to one the other day and I was like, oh yeah, the 49ers don't have a pick for me to play this game and make a 49ers selection, but they're going to be adding a lot of depth to this football team with their late round picks. That's for sure.
Also, someone kind of commented on one of my tweets saying Brock Purdy was selected with a comp pick the 49ers got from CJ Beathard.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's right. Yeah, because the end of every round from round 3 on is all comp picks. So yeah, Mr. Irrelevant every year is a comp pick. And essentially I think they add exactly an extra round of picks to the entire draft. So when you say 7th round, the draft is actually 8 32 picks. So it's actually I think it's maybe a couple extra. I thought they always added just 32, but maybe the coaching picks add even more to that now as well. But anyway, the last pick in the draft, yeah, that's a comp pick. So great job, Kyle, drafting CJ Beathard. Turned out to be a superstar quarterback in Brock Purdy, just a little bit later than he expected.
Here's the long game he was playing with that. He's like, I know which quarterback I want. I'm going to get this guy first and turn him into this guy. Well played.
What's funny too, and it's like I see a lot of tweets and a lot of like quick headlines. It's like, Tennessee Titans Tennessee Titans hire Rand Carthon to try to mimic the success of the 49ers front office. Like, I don't know if you can mimic what the 49ers did. Like, sure, draft a 7th round quarterback and hope he's gonna lead you into the playoffs. Good luck with that. Trade 3 draft picks for a quarterback that's completely unknown. Like, you could try all of these things. The hardest thing to do, you say, let's replicate what the 49ers are doing. Okay, draft starters and star players from the 5th through 7th rounds. Like, I don't, there must be a process involved. And I know Rand Carthon's been part of that process. So maybe he can bring some expertise there. Just, why is that formula work so well for the 49ers? Can he bring that into organization? But I mean, even that's hard. Like, the other thing is, like, it's like awesome. You look at these picks, you're like, the 49ers can trade for McCaffrey and Lance and whoever they want because they're so good at drafting in the late rounds. I don't know if we can keep banking on that because you're not supposed to do as well as the 49ers have. And that's really been the foundation of the team, is how well they've drafted rounds 5 through 7 and some really good undrafted free agents as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been saying that for years, right? Like, hey, we don't care about the high picks because later rounds they've been doing extremely well. I think a lot of it, maybe he or they do a great job of identifying character. And again, maybe not swinging for the fences with rounds 3 to 7, but guys that just fit. And if you can just fit, you maybe don't have to be the most talented guy. And I think I kind of referenced Richard Sherman and going to Seattle. Richard Sherman wasn't the most freakish athlete, but he just fit. He fit what Seattle wanted to do defensively. And, it turned out to be a Hall of Fame player. So maybe Carthon just has some of that. Maybe he had a big hand in identifying some of the late guys that they got. And maybe that's why, teams were like, hey, we need to get these guys because he's a big part of it.
It's just wild because Adam Peters is that number 2, right, behind Lynch. So it's like they went to like the number 3 guy. And they're like, oh, hey, you did enough there. We think you had a big enough hand in all of this that we're going to give you our number 1 job. Come on over, do what you did there. Bring your magic. That's wild.
Just want some of that. Everyone wants some of that 49ers sauce, man. And it's going to be Adam Peters next, maybe. Who knows? Maybe that's the next hiring cycle. D'Amico Ryans at some point. I still think it's probably one of those teams this year, but maybe he doesn't like those jobs. Maybe that becomes next year as well. So wild. And then after that, we'll be talking about, oh man, are we going to lose Brian Greasy? Like, it's going to keep going. If the 49ers keep winning, like that's what happens in the NFL. You want to mimic the teams that are doing well and get a piece of that. So with that
has anybody been hired yet? Like any of the spots that fire coaches have they hired any head coaches yet?
No.
I don't think any head coaches have been hired yet. We've got GMs now in Tennessee. Monty Osenford's been hired by the Arizona Cardinals as their GM. He was actually the assistant in Tennessee behind John Robinson, who got fired mid-season. And so he became the GM now of the Cardinals. And so some people are putting together the history he has with Brian Flores, because he used to be with the Patriots before he's with the Titans. He was with the Patriots for like 15 years from like a low-level scout, worked his way all the way up. And the Cardinals, I don't know if they've interviewed him yet, but there was reported interest in interviewing Brian Flores for the head coach position. So that might be the connection there. So maybe that's what we're seeing with the Cardinals. But those teams, or the Cardinals, look like so that probably means they're out on Sean Payton, unless there's a connection there, because big time coaches, if it's like a Harbaugh or a Sean Payton, they're going to bring their own guy in, or at least want to know who the guy is first. So if you hire a GM to lead your coaching search, then I think that sets up a certain hierarchy. We saw it with the 49ers. The 49ers hired Kyle, and he was the top of the pyramid, and he brought Lynch with him together. If you hire a GM first and he leads the coaching hiring process, then the GM's in charge and he's got player control and roster control,
Right.
and then the coach works for him kind of thing. So it looks like that's what they're doing in Arizona.
Yeah, I saw that the Arizona guy came in and said, "Oh, yeah, ego's not going to be a thing around here." Like, oh, all right, is that a shot at the guy who just left? Like, is that a shot at your quarterback? Like, what are we talking about
your
here?
former team, like who you taking? You're shooting shots somewhere. I think actually that's really a great point though, Wink, is the ego stuff and working together. And I think if I probably had to point to one thing that's more, sort of wide angle zoomed out with the 49ers, I think Croc hit on it. Character, the guys they drafted have been high character players that have hit. Because what's funny is actually they haven't been great with those comp third round picks, that third round area. They were good with Warner, who was earlier in the third round, but they've drafted a lot of like height, weight, speed guys, Tarvarius Moore and Weatherspoon and Ambry Thomas. And they're like 4-3 guys. They, what's funny is they might need to draft another corner again or a defensive back. I hope they don't go like, skinny 4-3 guy and try to turn him into something he's not. That's kind of what they've not done well. But in the later rounds, those 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, they've just identified guys that that were nasty and worked their butts off. And we saw that with Aaron Banks as well in the second round, because it's like, oh man, I don't know, but this doesn't even look like a great fit, but he's changed his body. He's worked hard. He's clearly smart and tough. And now he's a player in his second year. So I think all of the guys they've hit on are wired a certain way. Croc, you disagree?
I disagree with, all right, can you start talking about Witherspoon? And the interesting thing with Witherspoon is I think they evaluated the talent and ability the right way. I think they misevaluated up here, the mental aspect of it. Because there were times he'd go on stretches where it's like, is he a top 10 corner in the league? Like it would be like 4 or 5 games where it's like, wow, Witherspoon's playing lights out. And then he'd just have this weird game and then he'd kind of tank it. And then you're like, what the heck is going on, right? And you're like, God, for somebody that's so talented, why are there so many ups and downs? And I don't think it was like an ability issue. So when you start talking about, height, weight, speed, and putting it together, when he was on, I mean, it was like, to start 2019 season, what it looked like from him, you were like, gosh, this guy's playing like best corner in the league. Then all of a sudden had a little ankle injury, and then it just went crazy. And when I say crazy, not in the right direction. Even coming back to the point where he eventually got benched for Emmanuel Mosley, who wasn't a height guy, but definitely was a test type guy because he was skinny, but it was, really good 40 time, really good change of direction, really good 3-cone, all that type of stuff. So I think a big part in a lot of teams kind of miss on this part of it, right? Because these guys are just all talented, but the mental aspect of it is so huge. I always talk about like guys that end up being quote unquote bust or just not working out. I think a lot of it has to do with just the mental makeup of the player, and that's hard. And maybe the 49ers have done a good job with half the guys, and some of them, they were just, we'll see. He's not really checking all the boxes, but maybe Dante Pettis will kind of figure it out. And then it's just I'm not capable of figuring that out.
Yeah. You saw it with Reuben Foster. But they also miss sometimes with the guys upstairs, right? Like with Solomon Thomas, they're like, he's a Stanford guy. This feels like the safe pick, and it's like that seems like a big whiff.
Yeah, that was the whiff on the talent side of things because he was a tweener and he's high character player and everything, but he just wasn't really a fit anywhere. He was like kind of too small for tackle. Not
you can't do that. You can't do that in the top 10.
No, that high. No. Yeah, that was a big whiff. But they've come a long way, and that's the thing. They've learned from. They don't mess with those dudes with the bad character anymore. Like they learned from that, right? And so I think that's pretty important.
I kind of like the bad character guys.
And a little bit. I think you need a little bit of that. But I think the 49ers, character-wise, is probably about as good as you can get right now with this football team, top to bottom, like fighting for each other. Like they're tough, but they're not bad. They're like good people, but tough at the same time, and like bullies and will crush you on the football field. By the way, did you see? So there's something I saw just a quick clip earlier today. Remember the play where Deebo Samuel gets tackled and they twist his ankle, and everyone was talking about it after the game, how it really pumped him up. The very next play, Kyle Juszczyk blocks a guy and then like rides him like a horse.
Yeah, he's like,
I didn't see that until today. It was really funny. I
didn't see that.
But yeah, anyway, they've done a great job, and it's a collective effort. And we always hear about the late. Tell me about how this draft pick happened. Like, this was an quarterback coach. It was like Greasy and Clay Kubiak identified Purdy, and they were the ones really pounding the table for him. And then there's like, this area scout loved this guy. And then, this was a Adam Peters pick. We know which ones are usually the Kyle picks earlier in the draft that he has to have, and he can't go to sleep if he doesn't get them. And John Lynch has done a great job of making sure he listens to everybody and makes those picks. So it's really a collective effort. And that's probably what Rand Carthon's going to try to bring to the Tennessee Titans, if I had to guess. All right. That note, John Lynch, Executive of the Year, Kyle Shanahan, Coach of the Year, both really good candidates for those awards. But if you could only give one, let's get into that one next. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, statistics, news, analysis this season. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there. We're talking NFL, of course, NBA, Major League Baseball, and when that gets going. We got NHL hockey, but we've got men's and women's hoops as well on the college level. We're talking tennis. We're talking golf. How about combat sports, MMA, boxing, you name it. You can find it at BetOnline. And of course, if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well. I've seen some updated Super Bowl odds, and the best odds for the Super Bowl is an exact matchup is the 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs, redoing it from a couple of years ago. That is the highest odds of a game to happen. The 49ers are actually third behind the Chiefs and the Bills to make the Super Bowl, even ahead of those one seed Philadelphia Eagles as well at BetOnline. So you can get in on all of that action. Get over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. So there's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing going on here. And I think Brock Purdy is the perfect example of it. Like, did the coaching staff do such an amazing job with the 7th rounder that they turned him into something that he wasn't before? Or did the 49ers do an amazing job of drafting a starting quarterback in the 7th round, which is a total rarity? And you look at this roster, and I think about people are like, man, Kyle Shanahan's in his bag. And it's like, I hope he's in his bag. He's got Christian McCaffrey, and he's got George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, and the offensive line is playing awesome. And you got the best left tackle in the game, right? And we kind of talked about that, and that's what a lot of people said is like, look, if Kyle Shanahan's so amazing, how come the offense isn't scoring more until this latest run where they actually are scoring more now? In fact, they're around 35 points a game with Brock Purdy, a little under. And the greatest show on turf was 32 point something points per game. So like the 49ers offense under Brock Purdy is operating above the greatest show on turf levels from a points per game perspective. So that's what the offense is doing right now. And so Kyle Shanahan, and obviously he is in his bag, and like there's guys running wide open on the Seahawks last week, right? Like I was like, how does someone get that open on a deep cross, And it's just time and time again, and they're just hitting them. The defense is all obviously really good as well. You've got star players on that side of the ball. We talked about all the things they've done well as a front office. A lot of great coaches that are getting hired away. A lot of great front office people that are getting hired away. So it's sort of chicken or the egg thing here. You can only give one award, guys. Wink, I'll go with you first. Are you giving Kyle Shanahan the credit or John Lynch the credit? You going coach of the year or executive of the year for the San Francisco 49ers team?
It's tough because you said it, like they both have had a lot of guys that they've probably hired underneath them that have been taken away elsewhere, right? So it says a lot about not only, how they can look at the talent and get the most out of it, but also the people around them they surround themselves with. And that's impressive on both levels. I think it's easy to give either one of these guys it, but if I got to pick one, I'm going to go with Kyle, just because you said it. There's so many big personalities on this team, so many great players, and he's holding that locker room down, right? He's the main guy in that locker room. If you don't follow the head coach, you're not going to have a very good football team. Everybody listens to Kyle. Everybody knows what Kyle's doing. Kyle's out there getting the most out of these guys. You look at, what Christian McCaffrey was doing in Carolina before he left, and it was okay. But what he's doing now, and like, it's just incredible to see what he's getting out of these guys, what he's gotten out of Juszczyk, what he's been able to do with him, what he's done with an offensive line that was Trent Williams and who going into the season. And it's been amazing what Kyle's done. And to win 10 straight to end the regular season and then go win a playoff game, it's fantastic. Go Kyle.
It's a good point too about the McCaffrey thing. The Niners just played the Panthers, and nobody was like, oh, we're not going to be able to beat the Panthers because they got Christian McCaffrey, right? They never won anything with Christian McCaffrey there for 5 years. Comes to the 49ers. Now the 49ers are unstoppable, right? So yeah, that's and that's the other part of it is like, would George Kittle be the best, one of the top two best tight ends in the league if it wasn't for where his landing spot was? Would Brock Purdy be this guy, or you just be some, would he be, would your season be over if you turned to Brock Purdy if he was on the Miami Dolphins, right? Or the Baltimore Ravens, who had to turn to their backups and third stringers and are now out of the playoffs. So it's a good question. Would Deebo be Deebo if Kyle didn't scheme open looks to get him in space so he could show off his catch and run.
Or go coach the Senior Bowl so that he could get to know Debo and then,
Yeah, that was a good
John,
move by
get
them.
this guy.
Getting over to the Senior Bowl. What do you think, Croc?
I'm going with John Lynch. And they're both amazing, but I just think there's something to his ability to really take into consideration of his coach and what his head coach wants and the scouts and really lean on them. And there are a lot of GMs that have this kind of ego, and we saw how things really fell off the train tracks for Trent Baalke as a 49ers GM because, hey, I'm going to pick my guys. I'm going to pick the guys that I think fit. And all of a sudden, the team is bad. He's not doing anything in free agency. But John Lynch has seemed very willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that his coach has everything at his disposal. I mean, hey, you want to trade for a receiver middle of the year? All right, let's go get Emmanuel Sanders. You want to go get Christian McCaffrey? Hey, we'll give up everything. Hey, you want Trey Lance? We'll give up everything for that. He has been willing to do everything needed to make sure that his coach has all the players at his disposal, as well as take consideration from everyone else in the draft and late. Because how many times have we heard, oh man, this guy was it's some random guy oh, he liked him. Ron Carthon, he liked him. Or Adam Peters, this was his guy. But who's ultimately giving the okay is John Lynch. And I think he takes his ego out of it and says, I'm going to do what's best for us as a collective group. So I think a lot of you got to give it to John Lynch.
Yeah. And
you mentioned.
Go ahead.
I was just going to kind of hop on that thing about John Lynch. One of the first things he said and I think it was his opening interview was, hey, guys, I know what I don't know, but I'm going to bring in people around me that do know those things, and we're going to get this thing done. And you said he put his ego aside, and it's been incredible what he's been able to accomplish.
Absolutely. When you put together the best roster in the NFL and they didn't really take off until the best roster in the NFL was in place, I might lean towards John Lynch on that. But again, I think most decisions don't get made without Kyle either. So he is a quasi front office guy as well with the 49ers. And I think that's part of why John Lynch goes and gets his guys, because it's his show too. So it's a tie, and I'm not going to break the tie. I'm just going to leave it at that and enjoy the ride because we're out of time.
Respect.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll see if either Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch get those awards. They are both very deserving, but there's a lot of very deserving GMs and head coaches around the league this year for some of those awards as well. And the playoffs don't count for those either. So even if 49ers go to the Super Bowl, I think that voting is already done, if I'm not mistaken, for those awards. Croc and I back tomorrow. We've got a little Cowboys crossover, then Keys to Victory Friday to finish it up and get ready for Sunday's divisional matchup with the Dallas Cowboys. Talk to you then right here, Locked On 49ers.
See you.